What's up, guys? Roy here from COGconnected, hanging out with the Gears development team. How you doing?
I'm great.
Good. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody here?
My name is Matt Searcy. I'm the lead campaign designer on Gears of War 4.
So, just pretty easy task. Not a lot to live
No
up to, right?
responsibility. Yeah.
Did you feel a lot of pressure going into this?
Yeah, for sure. It's like equal parts pressure and excitement. Getting to work on something like Gears is it's huge as a game designer, right? Like, it's a massively influential game. I've always loved playing it, and when you meet the community, like they're so passionate that you just know there's this hunger for you to do something great. So yeah, there's definitely pressure, but it's a really fun project to work on.
As a fan yourself, coming into the series and working on it, were there certain design sort of like elements and scenarios that you particularly thought, I really want to bring this to Gears? And if so, did those things make it?
Yeah, I think when I first approached it, my main thing that I wanted to do is make it feel like a Gears game, and I knew that we couldn't just make Gears 3.5. So a huge part of the first year was making sure that not only had we fully understood what we were making, we analyzed a lot of what made enemies work and the weapons work inside of Gears, but also we knew we wanted to bring some great new enemies, especially some great new weapons, and tell a new story. And so we had these sort of parallel tracks of both those things going on, and the first year was a really exciting year for that reason.
Speaking about the enemies there in the demo that I played, forgive me, I can't remember the name. Was it a Pouncer?
Yeah, the Pouncers, yeah.
Guillermo del Toro, for example, like he always says that a monster needs to have a great silhouette before you even like go any farther with it. Mm-hmm. Do you guys design things in the same way, or what's your process?
Yeah, when we approach enemies, there's a few things to think about, right? So the first thing we think about is like, what role does the enemy have to have? What are we going to ask the player to do? So the Pouncer is a great example of a really dynamic enemy. He can pin you in cover, he can come near you and make you move out of cover, and if he actually catches you, if he pounces on you, he's got you pinned, and a lot of the time he's basically a kind of a co-op enemy. The most efficient way to get him off is to have a friend come and knock him off and open up his weak point for a quick kill. So he was a really ambitious enemy for us because he moves through all these different roles of Gears enemies. So we decide the role first, and then we start looking at concept arts, things that seem like they fit the right character of the enemy, because Gears of War enemies are so, they're so cool looking and they're so unique. Each one's got its own character. But as we start to explore the concepts, we're looking at animation. How is he going to move? We're looking at his silhouette on the battlefield. What's he going to look like? How am I going to pick him out? What are the tells he needs to have for his attacks? So, it's more than just creating a cool looking monster. You've got to think about all of that stuff, and it all gets iterated on, after it goes into the game until we've got it feeling the way we want to.
That Pouncer was probably my favorite enemy to fight in the game. Like you said, it was so dynamic. There was a lot happening. You're using Lancer from a cover, from a distance, then he's pounding on you and knocking you back off the cars, and you're having to switch to a shoddy, roadie running and charging, your shoulder charging him off your buddy there as well. Now, how hard is it to find that balance to bringing something like brand new, like the Pouncer, and also keeping it familiar for Gears? Just that balance, it must be tough to find.
That's
right?
all we talk about, right? I think it's a lot more work than people think it is to take something that already feels really good and not only make it better, but add new stuff to it, because it's very easy to add something new and have it feel very, very different and sort of break some of the things that already were great about the game. So whenever we looked at different enemies, we knew we needed to have some that were basically the same. We knew we needed a guy who went into cover and could shoot you. We did improve a bunch of the AI around the drones, so they do behave a little bit differently. We knew we wanted some guys that were kind of spiritual successors to enemies you'd seen before, like the Juvie. He comes and he flushes you out of cover, he rushes you, but he moves in ways that you've never seen before. And then we have some that are totally crazy and new, like the Pouncer, and even bigger ones. And the same thing with like our close cover combat. Those mechanics, as we explored what they were, we wanted something that felt like execution based and filled that sort of that moment in Gears where you get on opposite sides of cover, but it needed to work in campaign, it needed to work in MP, and it needed to be balanced with all the weapons and all the other moves. And that takes a huge amount of work and debate and iteration to get it right.
Seems bigger and more ambitious than past Gears, while at the same time narrowing the story and keeping it focused. It takes place over a night. It feels much more intimate already. How do you go about just like kind of tackling all that?
I mean, like early on, as you're doing all those creative discussions, you're talking about ideas of what can go in the game, but you're also talking about things that are important to the game. So whether it's something that we believed is sort of a pillar from the previous Gears games about how the characters talk, or like how the combat works, or how the mission pacing works, or if it's something new that we're exploring, like what does it mean to be, this squad of three younger people that grew up in a time of peace, and how is their camaraderie going to be different from Dom and Marcus, who've been through decades of war, you know, a decade and a half of war together. Those are all things that as you're doing ideas, you start to create these rules for yourself, these themes, these pillars, and you sort of rally around them and you look for more opportunities to make things awesome. A good example of the characters is we brought all the actors into one place. We had them deliver their lines together, and those guys have amazing chemistry because, you know, they're watching the game, they're delivering their lines, and they're basically becoming a squad on the spot.
What was your favorite moment, I guess, like doing this? Did you guys hit like a certain milestone or a marker where you were just like, yes, like this just feels so good?
There's a bunch of those. Lots of them come together in the last 6 months when you're working on a project. But some of the early ones I remember were like the first time we saw a cinematic that had all 4 characters, including Marcus, in it, and we got to feel that dynamic, not just between JD and Marcus, but also, you know, the roles that Kate and Del have inside the squad. And there's one cinematic that's a little bit later in the game that I just think like it defines the squad between the 4 of them in this really cool way. And it's not a particularly important story beat, but you kind of see each of their characters shining through. That, for me, when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that's the squad in Gears 4.
Early on, it was always talked about like you guys wanted to do something like totally new. Did you ever feel that you were sort of being held back creatively because you were still tied into the original trilogy Gears as opposed to just doing something completely fresh?
I don't think so. I think like when you look at what we wanted to do, when you looked at like, okay, we're going to pick 25 years later, that was all part of a big discussion about we wanted to make something that felt like a continuation of the legacy. And like Marcus Phoenix is a huge part of it. Like he's not just an iconic video game character, like he's a great character, like the way he talks and the way he behaves inside the game. So I think we don't really look at that stuff as being restrictive. We look at it as opportunities. We go like, what's the best story we can tell that would both be this like, you know, introduce new characters, new enemies, but have these echoes from the past that resonate and are important to the story, and things that people who are fans of the game are going to enjoy having around, and not just in a pure fan service way, but in a way that matters to the characters in the story and matters to the campaign.
What are you most excited to see from fans, or what are you most excited for fans to see, I should say?
I'm super excited for fans to play it because I think there's so much like little new stuff that we've put all in here that you can't really see it all when you're just watching. You know, the new enemies, the way they play, the storyline, the way the characters talk to each other, like you were saying. You know, Horde has been reimagined. We've got new multiplayer modes for people. I think there's a ton of stuff. People are going to find new things here, and everybody's going to find something they love. But I'm excited for fans to go through the story. I think we have a really cool story. I think it goes to a really cool place, and I'm interested to see what people think.
Yeah, but you get me excited. If you could run around with any weapon in Gears of War freely in real life.
In real life?
Okay, let's pretend.
Am I
Let's pretend.
surrounded by monsters? 'Cause
Exactly.
that's
Yeah. So
important.
let's say it's monsters. It's
Yeah,
it's
okay.
not just disgruntled. You're not just out there in the city. What's your favorite weapon in Gears
Is
of
this
War?
about me having fun or surviving?
Both.
If it's surviving, it's going to be the Overkill, the new shotgun, because it's devastating and it's pretty versatile. Like, you can fan it and you just create this like cloud of death if you're panicked, or you can use it tactically to kind of get slugs off. But if it's pure fun, it's the Buzzkill, just walking out with basically saw blades that bounce everywhere and creating like chaos. Like, it's pretty fun.
There's some great weapons that I've seen so far. In fact, not since I would say Turok 1 and 2 have I like had like an assortment of weapons where I've been like, yeah, these are awesome.
That's cool. I hope so. I mean, I think that weapons and gears are their own character, right? Like, when you look at each weapon and you look at it, it looks unique. You kind of, as you start to play with it, it's got its own feel, its own sound, and it's really important that each one has its own combat role too, so that when you go into combat, you're choosing your tool for the right purpose.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
For all things Gears of War, guys, keep it locked at COGconnected.
Cool.